My dear friends, I'm going to share with you if you should be using cold calling in your land business. There's two places where I think it might make sense to use cold calling. We'll kind of talk about the how-to on it. And yeah, so I just filmed a video recently going through all the juicy numbers and the different marketing channels and all that jazz. And one of the things was cold calling. And I kind of built out this like sequence and list that you'd go through this kind of process where you start with marketing channels, what you add on. But cold calling, there's actually kind of an interesting world where it can be used in two different use cases. Okay. So the first use case is one that I didn't talk about in the last video, and that's the new land investor. Now, this person is a very special kind of person because this person has no money. So you're special in your own right. And there's no shame in your game. Look, we all start there. I started with $7,000, like no shame in that game. And the reason I say no money is if you have some dough, you should go watch this video and you should start with direct mail, learn the system and go through this, because it'll save you a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. And frankly, I think it's going to be faster. But if you have no money and you have, I guess, more time than anything else, cold calling can certainly work. And I'll actually share a story with you guys about cold calling. Some of you guys will know a Leah coach by the name of Rylan Loader. They're doing multiple seven figures a year. In my opinion, he's got to be the biggest flipper that I know in land. Now, there's people that probably make more money doing subdivides and stuff like that, but from a pure heavy marketing, sales, flipping land business, I don't think there's anyone at their caliber. And I say that to say, well, he joined Leah when he was in college. And before that, he actually attended a webinar of ours when he was like 19 or maybe 20. And just attended a webinar, it's like a free little thing that I did teaching about the land business. He was very skeptical, but like he kept on messaging me on Instagram. And long story short, before he started his own land business and joined Leah, I had him work for me as an intern. And we just started cold calling people in Joshua Tree. So Joshua Tree, which is in San Bernardino County, and that's where we cut our teeth. Now, I don't remember the exact figures, but we cold called between him and I, somewhere between 2K and 3K people. Now, we made a lot of mistakes here. I'll talk about that in a second. I'm terrible at drawing, as you can see. 2 to 3,000 people, and I believe we got 2 deals. Now, those 2 deals, each one was like a classic, make 12 to 15 grand on. For the sake of simplicity, let's just say we made 20 grand, okay? Now, that whole little case study, that played out over a few weeks. And the reason I did this, now we didn't get paid over a few weeks. I'm saying we got the contracts over a few weeks. Now, the reason that I did this is because I had just left my job. So I've been doing land for a year. I had acquired about 60 some odd deals, had made enough coin to feel confident to leave my job, but I'd be kidding you if I didn't tell you that I was also scared out of my freaking mind. Like I was so nervous. And so it was like a month or two into leaving that job at the beginning of January 2021. And I had more time than money. So like I had been sending out mail, but mail's slow, right? So I'm like, God, I got to fill this time. And I had this nagging anxiety in me, this like deep fear that I'm going to have to go back to a job and my dreams are going to be crushed. And it just made me nervous, right? So I'm like, hey, I've got this idle time. I remember sitting in my apartment in San Diego, like, what the hell do I do with myself? I wasn't on meetings or any of that stuff. And so I just said, you know what, I'm going to start cold calling people. So I started cold calling people first in Joshua Tree, probably made about 500 cold calls, and then I passed it off to Rylan and he helped me. Anyways, we made somewhere in this range of cold calls and made 20 grand. So, all things considered, not a bad use of our time. Now, I quickly parlayed that money into mail and then just never really cold called again. Now, what did we do right here with our cold calling? Well, first off, I worked in a market that I knew and I kind of pre-priced my data. So when I was getting on the calls with these people, I was targeting these 5 acres in Joshua Tree. I could talk the talk. I could ask the right questions. Water was a big issue out there. I could, come up with a range offer pretty damn quick on those calls. So I was well equipped. Now, you don't need to have worked in the market before, but I think you need to be well equipped to do this stuff, right? If you call someone that owns a 100-acre tract in Texas and you ask the wrong questions or dumb questions or things that don't make sense, they're going to laugh you out of the room. Call a 100-acre ranch in Texas and ask them if they have sewer on it. They're never going to do business with you. So you need to display some level of competence. Now, I had also taken many seller calls before this, so I knew how to talk to sellers. That's important. And I also knew the properties that I was targeting, the right questions to ask, and how to formulate range offers. And in fact, what I had done before this is I had segmented my data into these little groupings, and I had priced those groupings as if I was going to send out a mailer. So I already had a pretty good sense of what I could offer and a pretty good sense of what these things were worth. Now, what we did wrong on top of this is, one, We didn't really add any filtration to our data. If I was a new land investor with not a lot of money and a lot of time, I would want to filter my data down, maybe more so than I would do in any other setting. Okay, if you've got a big marketing budget, I want to reach everyone. Screw whittling it down too much. When we do some filtration, we obviously do a lot of scrubbing, which we'll talk about here in a second. But for the most part, these touches are cheap and you've got a team and you might as well just get all of it out. In this case, I want to whittle that list down. So you might do things like they've owned for 10 years. You might say they're out of county, out of state, things along those lines. I didn't do any of that. So there's a lot of calls that I made to people that just bought 6 months ago, just dumb stuff, right? Just like stuff that seems so obvious if you're proficient, but it wasn't obvious to me at the time. The other thing that I didn't do is I didn't scrub any of my data for properties that I would never want to buy. So there was a lot of landlocked properties, literally properties that were like on sides of cliffs, like crazy topography, that I wasted a few minutes calling that person. And you could probably make a reasonable estimation that 25 to 30% of our data was just crummy. Like there's just bad people in the mix there, right? The next thing on top of that is I used cheap skip tracing. And the funny thing is, I don't even remember what skip tracing service I used, but it was not good. The amount of like disconnected lines, or like I call someone, they speak Spanish, the person's name is like John Taylor. And I'm like, this can't be the right person. Like just so much funny business there. So there's a lot of waste. And in fact, I think that we could have cut this in half and gotten probably the same number of deals. So maybe like 1,000 cold calls had I whittled down my data correctly. On top of that, you can make an argument too that it's not really worth my time to pursue such cheap properties, right? Same amount of effort to cold call a $200,000 property is a $20,000 property. So maybe I could have made 200 grand had I been going after higher value properties. So that's certainly an argument to be made. I still wouldn't go after ultra high end properties because you're going to be such a rook on the phone, but like 100K to like 300K, I mean, sure, you could give it a go. And that might be worth your while as well. So that's for the new person. Now the goal is really not to do this forever. Okay. The goal is to get some capital, snowball that into learning the systems and going and following this process here. This is the process to a 7-figure land business. This, in my opinion, is probably not the process to a 7-figure land business for most people. Maybe you're a freak and you can cold call and go land $1 million deal, and that could happen. But if you're new, you probably don't have the skill to do that. So this is like a means to an end. And then you want to follow this approach. Now, what's the second context that we could go and use? Cold calling. This is what I'm going to call old. You're an old person. And old in terms of you've been in the land business for some time. And this really kind of parlays back into this process here, right? I think there's a time and a place to bolt on cold calling, which again follows this, but I'm going to give you some additional meta that I didn't talk about. Some things that really no one's talking about. That's such fire-free game. I mean, just give this video a like. It's the least that you could do. So what most people are doing with this cold calling is, one, they personally have no education on cold calling. I have a firm belief that you cannot hire and train great talent if you haven't done that thing yourself and you're not at least somewhat proficient at that thing. So if you're an old dog that's looking to add cold calling in the mix, and when I say this, I'm talking about bringing it in-house. I'm probably not recommending for most people to use an agency. Maybe, but I think not for most people. I'm sure there's a time and a place, but I'm assuming you're bringing this in-house. The first thing that you need to do is get educated, okay? You need to go learn the ropes of cold calling. I'm not a cold calling wizard, but go learn the ropes. Go get educated and schooled on cold calling. On top of that, you should loop back here and go make some cold calls yourself, even if you've never done them before, to build a decent proficiency and to get an understanding of what a realistic workload is. Now, if someone's got a single line dialer, they can make maybe 150 to 200 calls a day with a single line dialer. That's not like manually dialing on a phone, like single line through a CRM. If you've got a triple line, you could probably make 1,000 cold calls a day. And golly, is it hard to draw this thing. So go feel that. Like go do a full day of cold calling and feel what that's like. And you really want to be able to have perspective, both to coach and lead your team, to also understand what reasonable KPIs are, and to have empathy for them in their role. It's so easy to be the big helicopter boss who's never done the thing, that has no perspective, and you will burn bridges unnecessarily with your team. Now, what most people are trying to do here is they're going into the Philippines, okay, or they're going into Mexico. Those are the two areas. I know why I'm trying to draw this. Hopefully that's helpful for you, okay? The problem is, I don't think that these are the best areas to hire cold callers from. There's certainly great talent there, but there's two hidden markets that I think could be more fascinating. And I guess they're not really hidden, but there's two other areas you could poke around in, okay? We'll touch on that here in a second. On top of that, they're going for the cheapest people. So they're trying to spend $1, I'm trying to spend a couple dollars. It's like when you see a Yelp and it shows like a bunch of dollar signs. I actually think we should put more dollar signs on our budget for who we hire. I think a great cold caller could be scooped up for $2 to $3 and they're going to crank. Yeah, like maybe you could hire an army of VAs and you pay them $1,000. They each make 20,000 cold calls a month. And okay, cool. But I feel like you're going to pass on what could be amazing deals if the person had the skill. So what are the areas that I really am kind of gung-ho to hire in? Well, the first one is South Africa. I think South Africa is an amazing market. You've got people that are like English is spoken often. Like there's a lot of English speakers. They have a beautiful accent. There's more familiarity potentially with some of the social norms that might relate to buying real estate in America. And so I'm very, very bullish in working in South Africa. And you're going to pay pretty similar to like Philippines prices. And so it's not really a far cry difference. Okay. The other one is going to surprise you. It's either Canada, like what? Canada? Yeah, Canada. Or maybe even, and I haven't done this, Australia. Okay. I think if you can find people that are a little more familiar with Western norms and have less of like a classic like teleoperator accent, and maybe even have an accent that's charming, like the Australian accent, the South African accent, I think it's a charming accent. I feel like inherently there's just a lot of trust built up there. And there's an amazing arbitrage right now between these currencies and USD. At least I know that's the case with Australia. I don't know what it's at for Canada currently. Now, of course, you are going to pay more than what you would over here. South Africa is going to be the cheapest. South Africa is going to be cheaper than these two. These are going to be more expensive, but they are going to be a lot less than what you're going to pay in America. Now, I haven't tested this theory for Canada or Australia. A second runner up is actually Egypt. And for this one, I'm just going to draw a cool pyramid because I'm obsessed with pyramids myself. And that is a terrible pyramid. The pharaohs would be disappointed. Egypt, again, bit of an accent, different social norms. There's a real cold call culture, very hardworking culture. And so I've had some good luck hiring over there for other sales related roles. Okay. So I think you want to look in different lead pools than where everyone else is looking. And I didn't add South Africa to this list. South Africa would be the top for me. I think you want to look into different lead pools than where everyone else is looking and tap into some higher quality talent that you're going to pay a bit more of a premium for. And I think that's totally fine. Now, no one that I know has tested this theory. I'm giving you like fresh off the printing press free ideas. What everyone has tested is the theory of $1,000 for the cheap overseas cold caller. And I just don't think it's a great use of that data. I think you should pay a bit more, go get really high quality cold callers and put them in your business and let them rip. Now, to make this work, you need a few things in place. Okay. One, you need an unlimited data subscription. I just don't think there's any way around that. Inside of Land Insights, the a la carte is 5 cents a record. Unlimited is $4,500 a year. You can pull as much data as you possibly want. Okay. That's the first thing. On top of that, you need high quality skip tracing. We use the premium skip tracing inside of Land Insights at 6 cents per skip trace. It gives you every contact, relatives, phone numbers, landlines, emails, all of it. Because if you're just pulling one phone number, a lot of times it's not going to be connected. It's going to be out of service, or they just won't pick it up. Or in some cases, none of the phone numbers attached to the seller get picked up, but the relatives do. And then they can loop you into the seller. That's deep cold calling. That's cold calling at a deeper level than what most people are doing. There's a real arbitrage there, in my opinion. Now, of course, I think we should still be segmenting our list. Maybe not as extreme as what we were doing over here, but still some kind of motivation segmentation to be mindful of, pursuing folks that have more of a likelihood to sell. On top of it, just like I talked about for this new category here, I think your team either needs to have somewhat pre-priced data or they need an amazing comping tool. So we built a comping tool in Land Insights. We've been using it for the last year. We comp properties in 2 to 5 minutes. It's absolutely insane. I think if you're cold calling people and you're getting on the phone and you say, yeah, let me get back to you with an offer, you've lost the deal. You need to be able to create a range offer right then and there if it comes down to it. Now, I'm not saying you have to make an offer on every single call, but if push comes to shove, you need to be ready. Okay. And ideally, you need to be able to understand due diligence at a pretty quick snapshot as well. One of the things that we have in Land Insights, and the comping tool is shipping this quarter. One of the things that we have inside of Land Insights today, though, is you can already see, like, let's imagine I'm going after this property over here, this one here. I can go see the MLS comps are already inside of here. The comping tool is this, or a level that's incomparable. It's insane. It's like seeing the matrix for land investing, but you need a very speedy way to comp. Now, if you don't have that, you can pre-price your data with range offers or something of the sort beforehand. Also, I believe in both of these situations, you need to take shots on goals. So when it comes down to it, If a seller is ready to rumble, you need to get that contract in their hand as soon as possible. What's going to happen in a lot of cases is these people are going to give you lip service. Call me back tomorrow. They never pick up the phone. Send me the contract. They never look at the contract. I'll talk to my wife. You never hear from them again. So if there's any indication of motivation, that contract needs to be sent on the call. Doesn't mean that they're going to sign it on the call, but it needs to be reviewed on the call at the bare minimum. So you or your team needs to be prepared to do that. And that means if you have a team that's doing this, and they need the ability to create an offer on the fly, both a range offer and push comes to shove, creating a real legitimate offer they're getting in front of them right then and there. Okay. That's my theory on cold calling. Now, it is not my favorite channel. That's why it's the bottom third down here. It's the third one out of 4. I think that what I'm suggesting here is a very cool concept that I have not seen anyone do. Maybe I'm not the first person to think of this. Maybe I am. I don't know. But still, I think there's an interesting idea to test this model. I think that the tried and true cheap VA cold calling, I just don't think it's amazing. Pay a bit more, test this concept, get some deals, report back to me. I hope this helped you. Cheers.